Before we begin, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, leave a like on this video, and tell us in the comments where you're listening from. Now, let's get into the story. In the summer of 2014, a man named David Holloway vanished in one of the most remote corners of the Amazon rainforest. He was 31 years old, born and raised in Portland, Oregon, the youngest of 3 siblings. His parents described him as curious from the very beginning, the kind of boy who asked questions no one could answer. When other kids played baseball, David would sit by the creek behind his house, staring into the water, wondering where it ended. He collected maps, tracing rivers with his finger, circling names of places that felt more like riddles than destinations. By his teenage years, that curiosity had turned into a restlessness. He devoured books about explorers, Fawcett, Cook, Shackleton, and filled notebooks with his own sketches of faraway jungles and deserts. At 17, he told his mother, "I don't want to just read about the world. I want to disappear into it." She thought it was just talk, but David meant every word. In college, while others planned careers, David saved for trips. He worked in cafes, carried boxes in warehouses, and used every spare dollar to fund journeys. He walked the Appalachian Trail, hitchhiked across the Rockies, and later backpacked through Southeast Asia. He kept journals for each trip, hundreds of pages describing not just where he went, but what it felt like to be there. He wrote about the smell of wet streets in Vietnam, the way the air thickened before storms in the Philippines, the sound of silence on mountaintops. His writing grew into a blog, The Hollow Road, which earned him a small but loyal audience. Readers described his work as raw, intimate, and unsettlingly honest, but David always wanted more. Friends recall him saying the same thing again and again. "Everywhere I go, I still see traces of the world I know. I want to go somewhere that erases me." That hunger eventually brought him to the Amazon. In late June of 2014, David boarded a flight to Lima, Peru. His family received a short email the night before. "Don't worry if I go quiet. I'll check in when I can. This is the trip I've been waiting for my whole life." From Lima, he flew to Iquitos, the jungle city unreachable by road. From the plain, endless green stretched to every horizon, broken only by the winding brown of the river. David pressed his face to the window like a child, scribbling in his journal. "The forest looks like an ocean with no shore. How can anyone believe it belongs to us?" On the ground, Iquitos overwhelmed him. Motorbikes screamed through narrow streets, stray dogs darted between carts, and the air carried a constant mixture of gasoline, fruit, and river water. He checked into a hostel painted in peeling blues and yellows. Other travelers remembered him vividly. He was tall, with sunburn already settling on his nose, and carried a notebook everywhere. He asked questions relentlessly, not about tourist attractions, but about the places no guidebooks mentioned. A German backpacker later told reporters, he kept asking about tribes, not the ones you visit on tours, but the ones people whisper about. He asked if anyone had ever seen them. He wanted to know if they were dangerous. Locals gave him the same warning again and again. There was a region upriver they called La Zona Roja, the red zone. Hunters avoided it. Families told stories of people who walked in and never came out. They spoke of nights filled with the sound of flutes, of figures painted in ash who watched from the trees. A shopkeeper told him directly, "That land is not empty. If you enter, you belong to them." David only smiled and wrote in his notebook. July 2nd, he boarded a rusted cargo boat heading upriver. The deck groaned under crates of bananas, cages of chickens, and families with bundles of food and blankets. The river carried them between walls of endless jungle. A passenger remembered. David leaning on the rail, eyes scanning the canopy, scribbling constantly. He gave fruit to children, cigarettes to fishermen, and asked every person the same thing. How far until the red zone? By July 5th, he had disembarked at a riverside village. Witnesses saw him buying a machete, dried fish, bottled water, and a hammock. He tucked his journal into a waterproof pouch strapped across his chest. A woman begged him not to go further. "The forest there doesn't want you," she said. He thanked her, smiled again, and stepped into the trees. The first entries from this part of his journal were filled with wonder. "The forest is louder than any city. Insects buzz like wires. Birds shriek like alarms. Every shadow moves. The air itself feels alive." He sketched towering trees with roots like walls, monkeys swinging above, ants marching in endless lines. But within days, his tone shifted. On July 6th, he wrote, "Carvings on trees. Circles with lines through them. Painted in red, still wet, not random. Markers, boundaries. Warning? That night. Woke to flutes. Thought it was wind at first, too steady. Then drums, slow, deliberate. The forest went silent between each beat. I feel watched." On July 7th, his entries grew frantic. Shadows moving. Too tall for animals. Faces painted. Black and white. Vanish when I turn. Carvings increasing. Stones arranged in spirals. Feathers tied with strips of bone. I think they're letting me see what they want me to see. The last message his family received was a satellite ping sent on July 8th. After that, nothing. Locals weren't surprised. To them, the outcome had always been certain. No one who entered the red zone came back. Authorities eventually organized a search team, but hunters refused to go. "That place isn't ours," one man told investigators. "If he went in, he belongs to them now." When officials pressed deeper, they found only fragments. A torn strap from a backpack, a sandal near a stream, pages from his journal scattered in the mud. The story those fragments tell is not one of a man who wandered too far and got lost. It is the story of someone who crossed a boundary he was never meant to cross. A man who tried to escape, but failed. The recovered journal pages suggest that by July 9th, David had realized he was no longer alone. One of the final complete entries reads, "I hear them in the trees. They move in silence, but not like animals. They stay just far enough away that I cannot see them clearly, only flashes of white paint across dark bark. I am not lost. I am being followed." Search teams later found boot prints near a stream, overlapping with bare human footprints. Some small, some large, circling the same area. Investigators who examined the site noted that the bear prints stopped suddenly, as if their owners had melted back into the forest. On July 10th, David's handwriting deteriorated into uneven scrawls. He wrote of waking in the night to see shapes crouched in the undergrowth, unmoving, their eyes reflecting firelight. "They do not speak," he wrote, "but they breathe. I hear it. I feel it. They are waiting for something." That same day, he described stumbling upon a clearing unlike anything he had ever seen. The sketch, though rough, showed a wooden figure nearly twice the height of a man, carved with outstretched arms and a hollow face. Around its base, bones had been arranged, in spirals, bleached white in the sun. David's note beneath the drawing read, "Not animal bones, human, arranged with intent. This is no warning. It is worship." It was after this discovery that his notes became erratic. Pages were stained, some smeared as if written while running. "They are closer now. I hear chanting in the distance, the flutes again, and drums that do not stop. The forest itself feels like it is pulsing. I cannot tell if I am walking toward them or if they are pushing me where they want me to go." The journal fragment found at the riverbank is the last evidence of his freedom. It ends mid-sentence. "They are surrounding me. There was no." The ink trails off into a jagged line, as though the pen had been ripped from his hand. What happened after comes only from second-hand accounts, whispers from villagers, scattered testimony from hunters who claimed to have seen what officials would not admit. One man told investigators that he saw foreigners tied with vines and marched single file through the forest by figures painted head to toe in black and white ash. Another insisted that he once glimpsed a fire burning in the red zone from miles away, smoke rising with a smell that was not wood. The soldiers sent into the forest during the initial search never recorded anything official about what they found. But privately, one admitted that they discovered remains too gruesome to describe. Bones cracked open lengthwise, marrow removed, skulls scorched by flame. He refused to speak further, saying only, "They are still there. We were never meant to see them." From pieced-together accounts, the sequence becomes clearer. After days of being stalked, David was finally cornered. He tried to fight. One villager claimed to have found a broken machete in the mud, its blade bent, vines wrapped around the handle as if ripped away. But he was overwhelmed, dragged into the trees by dozens of hands, bound and silenced before he could resist further. What followed was described by locals with a kind of hushed terror. At night, fires were seen flickering in the distance, accompanied by chants that rose and fell like waves. Witnesses claimed the sound of drums carried for miles, steady and inescapable. No one dared go closer, but one fisherman told reporters he had heard screams carried on the wind, cut short by flutes playing in unison. Investigators recovered no body, only fragments. The journal pages, torn fabric, scattered belongings. But to those who live near the red zone, the conclusion was never in doubt. They spoke of the Chai Mara, a name rarely said aloud, a secretive tribe said to practice ancient rituals of sacrifice and consumption. Whether myth or reality, the warnings had been clear. David had walked into their territory. He had seen their idol. He had been claimed. The chilling part is that his story is not unique. Older villagers recalled at least 3 other outsiders who disappeared in the same region in previous decades: missionaries, prospectors, even another traveler. None ever returned. The forest swallowed them all, leaving only silence, bones, and rumors. For David, the pursuit had ended. He had crossed the boundary, and now he belonged to the tribe that watched from the shadows. His attempt to escape had not yet begun, but capture was the first step toward the nightmare that would follow. What happened after David's capture cannot be confirmed through official reports, but the fragments of his journal, along with testimonies, whispered by locals, paint a picture so vivid it is impossible to ignore. The first complete page found after his disappearance was written in handwriting so uneven it looked as if it had been carved with desperation. They bind my wrists with vines. They blindfold me with cloth that smells of smoke. I stumble as they drag me forward. I hear their feet in the mud, dozens of them, all moving together. They do not speak words I understand. Only grunts, clicks, and the sound of flutes. Always the flutes. The path he described seemed endless. He wrote of being shoved forward through foliage, branches cutting into his skin, his legs trembling. After hours, maybe days, he was forced into a clearing where, for the first time, he saw the tribe's settlement. Huts built from leaves and wood, skulls on stakes, bones tied together as decorations, children painted black and white, staring at me as if I am already meat. Fires smoldering with a smell I cannot place. It is not wood, it is not animal. David was thrown into a pit dug into the ground, its walls lined with sharpened stakes to prevent climbing. The top was covered with a lattice of branches. He could see the sky through it, but never freedom. Each morning, they opened the cover, long enough to throw down scraps, sometimes roasted roots, sometimes pieces of meat he dared not identify. He ate because starvation was the sharper enemy. He wrote by hiding his notebook under his shirt, scribbling only when the guards drifted. His words became fragmented, raw. They chant at night, Circle fires, dance painted in ash, drums louder than heartbeat. I smell flesh burning. I know what it is now. God forgive me. In another entry, his hand shook so violently the ink splattered. They eat them. Not animals, men. I saw ribs blackened by fire, a skull placed on the idol, children clapping as the elders carve. The flutes are not music. They are signals, calls to gather. I am next. I feel it. His first attempt to escape came on what he described as the third cycle of the moon. One night, a storm tore across the canopy, wind-bending trees, rain drowning the fires. Amid the chaos, the tribe retreated into their huts. David clawed at the wall of the pit, digging his fingers into wet earth, ignoring the pain as nails split. Somehow, he pulled himself high enough to grasp the lattice, breaking it loose with frantic strength. He staggered into the storm, mud sucking at his legs, heart pounding like a drum. He made it as far as the edge of the clearing before a shrill whistle pierced the night. He wrote, "They appeared from everywhere. Faces white as skulls, eyes blackened with soot. Dozens of them, silent except for the flutes. They did not chase me. They closed in, slow, certain, like hunters circling prey that cannot escape. One struck me behind the skull. Darkness. When he woke, he was back in the pit, his wrists bound tighter than before. They had beaten him, but not killed him. Not yet." Weeks blurred together. His entries grew more detached. He wrote of heat, insects crawling over his skin, the constant stench of smoke and blood. He described ceremonies where captives, others, taken before him, were displayed, bound to stakes, their cries silenced by chanting until the fires consumed them. Whether these were visions from fever or witnessed truth, no one can know. But the sketches in his notebook, bodies hung upside down, knives carved from bone, rows of sharpened teeth painted in ash, suggest he saw far too much. His second escape attempt came after one of these rituals. Perhaps the tribe believed his spirit already broken, for they tied his bonds more loosely. He waited until night, when the chanting died and the fires turned to embers. Slowly, silently, he loosened the knots and slipped free. He crawled through the village, passing huts where shadows moved inside. He described the sound of sleeping, breaths, the hiss of coals, the gleam of skulls in firelight. At the edge of the forest, he found a machete left against a tree. He seized it and ran. For hours, he stumbled through the dark, branches tearing at his arms, his breath ragged. He wrote, "I thought I was free. I thought the forest itself wanted me gone. But then came the drums. Always the drums. Not behind. Me. Around me. Everywhere." By dawn, he collapsed near a stream. He drank water with shaking hands, feeling the first warmth of sun through the leaves. And then he heard it. The flute. Just one note, clear, rising from the trees. When he looked up, he saw them. Painted figures, dozens of them, crouched in the branches, watching. Not chasing, not moving. Waiting. He dropped the machete. He wrote, "There is no escape. They let me run. They wanted to see me break. They enjoy the hunt more than the kill." When the search team later recovered the scattered journal pages near a riverbank, these were the final legible entries. The rest were smeared, waterlogged, torn. But the words that remained told enough. A man, caged, hunted, broken by the relentless ritual of a tribe that had no intention of letting him go. David Holloway had tried to escape twice. Both times, the forest closed in. Both times, the flutes, called the hunters. Both times, he was dragged back to the pit that waited for him. His story did not end there. The tribe was not done with him yet. The final chapter of his ordeal was still to come, and it would seal his fate forever. The final attempt came weeks after his second failure. By then, David was no longer the same, man who had walked into the forest with a notebook and a restless heart. His entries, when he managed to write them, read more like fragments of prayer than observations. If anyone finds this, tell them I tried. Tell them I did not walk willingly. Tell them I wanted to come home. His handwriting trembled, words collapsing into lines and scratches as though the jungle itself had invaded his mind. According to one villager who later whispered his story, David had been chosen. The Chaimara, as they were sometimes called, did not kill indiscriminately. They waited, they prepared. They fattened their captives like livestock, but also studied them, watched them, broke them. They believe the spirit must weaken before it can be taken, the villager said. Whether truth or folklore, David's condition by then suggested that the process had nearly run its course. Still, on a night when the moon hung low and red above the canopy, he found his chance. The storm that swept through the forest that evening was unlike anything he had described before. Lightning tearing the sky into pieces, rain so heavy it drowned the fires. For the second time, chaos gave him cover. They had tied his wrists with less care, convinced he was broken. He waited until the guards sought shelter from the storm, then pulled until the knots gave way. Blood slicked his skin, but he ignored the pain. He crawled out of the pit, mud swallowing his hands and knees, and staggered toward the trees. This time, he didn't look back. He ran barefoot through the dark, each step carving skin from his feet, each breath ripping his chest. Branches whipped across his face, rain blinded him, but still he pushed on. He wrote later in what would be his final entry, "I cannot die in their fire. I cannot. I will find the river. I will let it take me home. God, guide me." For hours, he stumbled blindly, guided only by the distant rush of water. When he finally reached the riverbank, he collapsed into the mud. His hands shook as he pulled out the notebook, scribbling by flashes of lightning. The words blurred, desperate. "They are behind me. I hear the flutes. Always the flutes. They do not run. They wait. I have no time." The last line cut off. Halfway through, "If I fall." When the storm cleared at dawn, villagers miles downstream reported hearing drums that did not belong to the weather. They said the sound carried for hours, steady, rhythmic, unrelenting. None dared travel upriver to see. Days later, search teams combing the river found shreds of fabric tangled in branches, a broken machete blade, and the journal pages scattered and waterlogged. But David himself was gone. His body was never recovered. Officials ended the investigation quietly. The report listed him as missing, presumed dead, likely drowned or succumbed to environmental hazards. No mention was made of the bones found near the idol, of the testimonies about painted figures, of the journal entries describing rituals and fires. To acknowledge these would be to admit something the modern world refuses to believe: that there are still places where old gods are fed in blood and bone. For his family back in Oregon, closure never came. His mother kept his childhood room as it had been, maps still taped to the walls, his handwriting etched into the margins. His sister, Natalie, who had begged him not to go, told reporters he thought he was chasing adventure, but he walked into a nightmare. He thought he could escape, but no one escapes them. His father refused interviews altogether, saying only, "The jungle swallowed him because he would not listen." Among anthropologists, the case became a dark legend. Some argued that David's writings were proof of uncontacted tribes still practicing ritual cannibalism. Others dismissed them as the hallucinations of a man weakened by hunger, fever, and fear. But the drawings, spirals of bones, hollow-eyed idols, flutes carved from bone, matched stories whispered by locals for generations. The debate remains unresolved. Travelers began repeating his story in hostels as a warning. "Don't go off the map," they'd say. "Remember Holloway." Some claim to have heard the flutes themselves when camping near the red zone, soft, notes drifting on the wind, followed by silence so deep it pressed on the chest. Hunters avoided the area altogether, saying the forest itself belonged to others. "Yeah, you do not hunt there," one man told a journalist. "You do not cut trees. You do not speak. You walk away." In the years since, others have disappeared. In the same region, missionaries, prospectors, even curious tourists. None returned. Some say they joined the same fate as David. Others believe the tribe took them for their fires, their ceremonies, their hunger. Authorities, as always, blamed the jungle. Drowning, jaguars, heat stroke. But among the people who live along the river, the explanation is simpler. "The Chaimara take what they want," one fisherman said, "and once they take you, you do not come back." The most chilling part is that fragments of David's story still surface. A hunter swore he found a skull carved with lines like the drawings in David's journal. Another man claimed to have seen a pale figure tied to a stake in the distance, lit by firelight, before running in terror. No evidence has ever been brought forward, but the whispers persist. What is certain is that David Holloway tried to escape. He fought vines, storms, hunger, and the silence of the forest. He clawed his way out of pits, ran barefoot through endless mud, and reached the river that might have carried him home. But in the end, the flutes always found him. The drums always closed in, and his body, like so many before, was never seen. Again, to this day, the red zone remains avoided. Locals refuse to enter. Guides warn foreigners to steer clear, and at night, when the forest grows too quiet, travelers claim they can still hear the faint sound of flutes drifting from the trees, followed by the steady, patient echo of drums. Whether warning or celebration, no one can say. The Amazon is more than trees and rivers. It is a place of memory, of silence, of rituals that never ended. David went seeking myth and found it. He thought he could escape, but he failed. His words, preserved in scattered rain-soaked pages, are all that remain. They remind us that some boundaries are not meant to be crossed, some secrets not meant to be uncovered. And if you ever find yourself near the red zone, when the air grows still and your skin prickles with unseen eyes, remember his story. Remember the flutes, the drums, the pit, the fire. Remember that he ran until the river took him, and still, it was not enough. Because once they decide you belong to them, there is no escape.